Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Zero Hour. Our next guest needs no introduction, but I'll give him a quick one anyway. Bernie Sanders is the longest-serving independent member of Congress in American history. 16 years in the House before being elected to the United States Senate in 2006. He is an independent. He is a progressive. He has just released a 12-point plan on the economy, and we are delighted to have him with us. Senator Sanders, thanks so much for joining us.
Richard, thank you very much for having me.
Listen, again, it's a pleasure, and I wanted to start out, I wanted to talk a little bit about your 12-point plan in more detail, and this is a 12-point plan for restoring the economy, but I guess my first question for you would be this, Senator Sanders. Why now? Why is this the moment in history to release this 12-point plan?
Well, it's a moment in history for a couple of reasons, Richard. Number one, there is great demoralization among the American people. The reality is that the middle class of this country has been disappearing for the last 40 years. Median family income today is $5,000 less than it was in 1999. Real unemployment is not 5.8%, it's over 11% if you include those people who work in part-time and those people who have given up looking for work. Youth unemployment, 20%. African-American youth unemployment, 30%. The gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider and wider. So the middle class is really hurting despite a huge increase in productivity. And people are saying, why? Why does it have to be that our infrastructure collapses? Why does it have to be that our kids can't afford to go to college? Why is childcare unaffordable? So I think it is time to give an agenda to the working families of this country that says, yes, we can improve life for the middle class. Yes, we can reduce the gap between the rich and everybody else. Yes, we can rebuild America. I think now is the time to do that.
Well, let me ask you a question, Senator Sanders, because now I come, for example, I grew up in the 20th century. I was born in the 50s, grew up in Utica, New York, a working class town, good factory jobs everywhere. You could get by on one income. If you wanted to, you know the story.
Yes,
and that was a period of growth. That was a period of expansion. That was a period of optimism.
Yes.
College was affordable, on and on and on. Now, I talk to a lot of people who say, including in Utica, when I go back there, those days, they're gone forever. And how do we, and first of all, can we really restore those days once again? And secondly, can we make the people of this country believe that those days can be restored?
Well, Richard, those are great questions. And I can't tell you that I know the answer, but I think we have no option but to try as hard as we can. If this country, as you've just indicated, was once the envy of the world in terms of the growth of our middle class. My father came to this country at the age of 17. It's the story of millions of families without a nickel in his pocket, and he never made any money. But he was able to send his two kids to college. That was a pretty good achievement from where he came from. And that was the story of millions of families. You indicate that 40 or 50 years ago, you could go to one of the great public universities in the world here in the United States. You know what tuition was? It was free.
Right.
And now it's unaffordable for the middle class and working families. 30, 40 years ago, our infrastructure was the envy of the world. Today it is crumbling. So the question is, why is that happening? How do we rebuild America and in the process rebuild the middle class and working families of this country? Can it be done? And the answer is yes, it can be done. But we have to put, I think, our finger on the crux of the problem. And the crux of the problem is that increasingly the economic and political systems of this country are run, and I don't mean to be overly rhetorical here, but I think it's true. A billionaire class that has unbelievable power economically, and as a result of Citizens United, is now capable of buying the political system as well. Can we defeat them? Can we take them on? Can we restore this country into a vigorous democracy and an expanding middle class? And if we cannot convince the American people that we can do that, if the American people are giving up on the political process, then I suspect that we are going to continue the slide into an oligarchic form of government.
Well, we're talking with Senator Bernie Sanders, and I do think it's a great point. And I think it's, we remember Hubert Humphrey talking about the politics of joy. Perhaps his timing wasn't great. It seems that the Republicans are practicing the politics of despair on some of these issues. You just can't get there anymore. And a lot of Democrats, it seems to me, are not challenging that with an optimistic, activist view of the future.
It's funny you use Hubert Humphrey in the concept, the phrase "politics of joy." Where we are today is that if you are an intelligent, concerned citizen who is interested in public service, and you're thinking about, I'm really concerned about what's going on in America. I think I'm going to run for office. Maybe I'll run for the House. I'll run for the state legislature. And then you rethink it. You talk to your wife. You talk to your husband, and they say you are crazy. You're going to have to raise unbelievable sums of money. You're going to get attacked. Your whole personal life is going to be investigated. Everything you did for the last 50 years, every time you went through a red light, that's going to be a front page story. Do you really want to do that?
Right.
And Richard, what is very scary is a lot of people are saying, no. Why do I want to be involved in politics? Why do I want to serve my community or my country? So, that's part of the need to overcome this, the need to address this absurd campaign finance situation now where billionaires can spend unlimited sums of money to destroy people and convince people that getting involved in politics is not what you want to do. We've got to change that, and it requires a political revolution to do that. It requires overturning Citizens United through a constitutional amendment, requires public funding of elections. It requires making people proud and excited about living in a democratic society where they can contribute their ideas and energy to improve life in this country.
Well, first of all, you convinced me. But secondly, not that I'm running, but secondly, I guess I was going to ask you this question a little later, maybe, but I'll ask it now. When we talk about discouraging people, the system discouraging people from running for office and so on, I guess I had a friend who ran for Congress this year and didn't make it, and I remember saying to her, or thinking at least about her, well, do you really want to spend your day having these grim discussions with these negative people and so on? So if you don't mind my asking you, Senator Sanders, what do you do for fun or to relieve the aggravation or just to get through your day?
That's a good question. I am very lucky. I have a great family, 4 kids, 7 grandchildren who are the joys of my life. There was once a bumper sticker I saw, Richard, which said, if I knew how much fun grandchildren were, I would have had them first. My wife and I, spend as much time together as we can. I live in a great community, and I'm proud of my state of Vermont. I get out and meet terrific people. Today, just this morning, I went to a meeting with hundreds of high school kids, and 26 different schools from Vermont came together to talk about how we can deal with climate change and what young people can do. And when you go to meetings like that, you see great teachers and great kids, it inspires me, and it gives me the confidence to keep going on. On the other hand, I should tell you, I just came back from Washington yesterday, and that's pretty depressing. So, we just do the best we can. But I think to answer your question, what's the alternative? We have got to fight for our kids and our grandchildren. This is a great country. It meant so much to my father, who came here with nothing. And I'm not going to let, right-wing billionaires destroy it.
Well, good answer, Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, I want to ask you also, when I read your 12-point plan, and I want to get into a couple of the elements in a little more detail, but when I read it, I thought, in a way, this seems to be a response to the election of November 2014. I looked at some of the ads run by some of the Democratic candidates and watched some of the campaigns, and it seemed as if the campaign strategy, as far as I could tell, was we're not those other guys, some variation of. And I even saw one ad, and I'm told them he's a very nice man. I won't name the senator, but where he literally said, the Republican Party doesn't have all the answers. The Democratic Party doesn't have all the answers.
Right.
And that's okay. But I mean, at a certain point you say, well, then what are you standing for? So
yeah, I think that's right, Richard, and your point is correct. What was disturbing to me about the recent election was not just that the wrong guys won, but that, and not just that the turnout was abysmally low, indicating so many people giving up on the political process. It was that you had a campaign taking place in the midst of a moment in which the United States probably faces more serious problems than at any time since the Great Depression, and you did not hear serious discussion about these serious issues. You know, Iowa elected a candidate who was very good at castrating pigs, I guess, and other candidates ran on how good they could shoot their rifles, and yet very few people were talking about how we deal with the issue of the middle class collapsing and the rich getting much richer, with 95% of all new income going to the top 1%, or a trade policy which has encouraged corporations to shut down in America and move to China and other low-wage countries. One would think that maybe those are the issues that might be vigorously debated, and candidates would come up with their ideas. But I think you're right in saying that this campaign was kind of devoid of that discussion.
Well, we're talking with Senator Bernie Sanders, and you know, speaking of that hog castrating ad, which did you hear it, by the way, or just read about it?
I read about it.
Oh, I'm telling you, hearing it's a very aggressive ad, and it's very. She basically was saying, "We'll get those guys who are ruining your life," and that gets to my next question, which is, it seems to me that the Republicans were able to demonize somebody because people are frustrated out there, and they were saying, "Well, right. It's their fault. It's government's fault. It's the liberal elite's fault." And Democrats, it seemed to me, a lot of them seem to be saying, "Well, everybody's nice."
Right. No, I think you're right. What the Republicans did, it was a very unified campaign, and that's the way they did it. And you go from the West Coast to the East Coast, and the ads are basically all the same. And what they say is, how are you feeling about the economy today? Are you hurting? People are nodding their heads, yeah, I'm hurting. Well, Barack Obama is the president. He's the cause of all your problems, right. And candidate X voted with Obama 98% of the time, vote for our guy. That was their campaign. What the reality is, of course, is, and the Democrats and Obama have been terrible on this issue, is that it's important to remember where we were when George W. Bush left office.
Right.
And we're losing 700,000 jobs a month, and the financial system was on the verge of collapse. Well, we kind of forgot about that. But the main point to be made is not just that. It's that, yeah, we have made some improvements in the last 6 years, but you know what? The economy today still stinks for working families, many of whom are working longer hours for lower wages or falling into poverty. And what we need, and what these 12 points that I brought forth, is an aggressive agenda that says, you know what, we're not giving up on America. We can rebuild the middle class with ideas that are not particularly radical, by the way, investing heavily in our crumbling infrastructure and creating 13 million jobs. I don't know, you know, it's not a terribly radical idea. It's a pretty sensible idea.
Well, I think if I recall correctly, I think Dwight D. Eisenhower did it. So he was president when we built the federal highway system.
Exactly, he built the interstate highway system, which I think most people think was a pretty good idea, and he created a whole lot of jobs doing that. And now, I'm sorry, go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry, Senator Sanders. We'll have to take a very brief break. I hope you can stick with us. We can talk a little bit more about it after this very short break. We're speaking with Senator Bernie Sanders on the Zero Hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow. We will be right back. And we are back on the Zero Hour with Senator Bernie Sanders. And when we went to the break, we were talking about the fact that Dwight D. Eisenhower was president when the federal highway system was built. You know, Senator Sanders, these ideas, your 12-point plan, rebuilding our roads, addressing climate change, creating jobs, and so on, protecting unions, these were never radical ideas before during our best years. I mean, if you read as you probably have, the 1956 Republican Party platform, Eisenhower boasts about increasing the number of people on Social Security and the number of people who were in unions. So what happened, and how do we get back to?
Well, Eisenhower would not be able to get into the Democratic Party today, as a matter. Into the Republican Party today, of course, his views would be considered much too progressive. You know, what has happened? I think that's the subject for a very long discussion, Richard. But in brief, I think what has happened over the last 35 or 40 years the Koch brothers and other very wealthy and powerful people, through the expenditure of billions of dollars, through the establishment of a lot of think tanks, through electing candidates who are extremely right-wing, have moved the entire political system to the right. The Republican Party, which was once a moderate conservative party under Eisenhower, for example, is now a right-wing extremist party. The Democratic Party, which was once a party under FDR and Harry Truman of the American working class, is now a centrist party heavily influenced by Wall Street and corporate money. And that's where we are today. So ideas that were once not particularly radical, rebuilding infrastructure, raising the minimum wage, pay equity for women, a trade policy that works for working people and not just for multinational corporations. The idea of a national health care program, for God's sakes, has been battered around in this country for decade after decade after decade. We are the only country in the industrialized world that does not guarantee health care to all people. Taking on Wall Street, which now is, unbelievably powerful, has assets equivalent to 60% of the GDP of the United States, breaking them up. You know what? If Teddy Roosevelt were president today, that's probably what he would do. Or William Howard Taft. So you're right. These are not particularly radical ideas, but within today's political context, I guess they are.
So, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a story about Teddy Roosevelt, J.P. Morgan, saying, why are you bothering us? Why don't you just send your man around to sort it out with my man? And that's what the Democrats, as well as the Republicans, seem to do nowadays. So I guess, what is your feeling about the appointment, since we're talking about Wall Street, of Wall Street banker Antonio Weiss to Treasury Department position? Been a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah, I'm opposed to it, and I've come out publicly in opposition to it. One of Obama's weak spots is to continue to appoint people to his financial team who come from Wall Street. And this particular fellow, Mr. Weiss, I believe, was active in Lazard, helping corporations avoid taxes. I don't think that's the kind of guy you need. I think there are plenty of economists out there who have the experience and the desire and the background to create jobs for working people and not help corporations avoid paying their fair share of taxes. So I will vote against that appointment. I have voted against most of Obama's Wall Street-related appointments.
So another Democrat who's considered somewhat close to Wall Street, as you may have heard, is Hillary Clinton. And I do have to ask you this question because the subject has come up. Are you going to announce for president? And if so, do you want to do it right here on this show?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Richard. But I'm going to have to forego it.
All right.
Look, here's the simple truth. It's no secret. I have been public about saying that I am thinking of running for president of the United States. But for a whole lot of obvious reasons, if you undertake a mammoth undertaking like running for president of the United States, you got to do it well. I mean, it's a tremendous sacrifice for one's family and the people you're close to. And most importantly, if I'm going to carry the progressive banner on a national landscape, I have to do it well, and I have to know that there is the kind of support that one would need in order to win this campaign. And that means, are there millions of people who are prepared to work really, really hard in a grassroots effort, taking on the billionaire class, taking on Wall Street, taking on the energy companies, and taking on the pharmaceutical industry, and the Koch brothers, and all these other people who today exercise enormous power? Are people prepared to fight for a political revolution in America? And it's easy to give a great speech to a group of supporters, a few hundred people in a room, but it's a lot harder to ascertain whether there is that kind of grassroots support. So that's what I'm trying to determine right now. And if I conclude that there is, I will do it. And if I conclude that there's not, I won't.
Well, that seems reasonable enough. And in terms of your 12-point plan, you were one of the first, if not the first, in the Senate to propose Social Security expansion. It was an excellent plan, including how it would be paid for with taxation and so on. What would you want our listeners to know most about? We can go through as many of the points as you want, but what would you want listeners to know most about it, and what are your thoughts about paying for it?
Okay, in terms of Social Security, for years, the Republicans have led the effort, and joined by some Democrats, I'm sad to say, who said, we've got to cut Social Security, and they give all their reasons. The truth of the matter is that Social Security could pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 19 years, and has about $2.5 trillion in the trust fund. And if we want to do what I think we have to do, which is to expand Social Security benefits, we have, Richard, just a significant and growing number of seniors who are living in poverty, and they're not making it on Social Security. The way you expand Social Security and extend the solvency of Social Security is by lifting the cap, which is currently at $117,000. You can start at $250,000. You lift that cap, you will bring in, and you're telling millionaires that they're going to have to contribute their fair share into the Social Security fund. You do that, you can extend and expand Social Security, and that's exactly what I believe has to be done. I think in terms of the safety net, whether it's Medicare, I am vigorously opposed to the Republican plan to voucherize Medicare. I, in fact, believe that the United States should join the rest of the industrialized world with a national health care program, a Medicare for all single-payer program. I will not support cuts in Medicaid. We have 40 million people today who have no health insurance despite the modest gains of the Affordable Care Act, and I don't want to see more people thrown off of health insurance. So I think that while we try to rebuild the economy and create the millions of good-paying jobs that we need, we have to be mindful that poverty is a very, very serious problem in this country. We have to protect our most vulnerable citizens.
Well, I can't argue with any of that. And, during the Dwight D. Eisenhower presidency, you may know this quote, but Elvis Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, said, "I consider it my patriotic duty to get Elvis into the 90% tax bracket." And because the top tax bracket highest, right, 90%. So in terms of paying for the 12-point plan, would higher taxes for the wealthiest among us be a component of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, you have a situation now where the United States government is losing about $100 billion a year, with corporations stashing their money in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, Luxembourg, and other tax havens around this country. And that is totally absurd. You have the last study that I have seen suggests that 1 out of 4 large corporations pays nothing in federal taxes. We have an estate tax which has been significantly weakened so that the wealthiest people in this country can pass on their billions to their kids. So I think that we do need very serious tax reform, which says to the corporations in this country, who by and large are enjoying record-breaking profits, they're going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. You talked about Eisenhower. Back in the early 1950s, corporations contributed about 32% of the tax revenue coming into the federal government. Today, that number is 10%. Today, you have hedge fund managers who pay an effective tax rate lower than factory workers. So we need real tax reform, and we have to say to the wealthiest people and largest corporations, you are going to have to stop paying your fair share of taxes.
That makes sense to me. And before we leave this topic altogether, anything else? Your 12-point plan includes reversing climate change, rebuilding the road, creating jobs, breaking up the big banks, healthcare for all. I have to say, parenthetically, I used to work in healthcare economics, and I used to say that I don't support single payer, not because it isn't the right idea, but because I don't think it's politically feasible. I am now convinced it's the only thing that's politically feasible in the long run. We'll screw anything else up if we get the chance. And I guess, so my last question for you would be, before we go on to the close, is there anything else besides that which you want people to know about this plan?
Well, I think you asked some of the right questions, Richard, and it comes down to, I think and by the way, all of this stuff in detail is on my website, sanders.senate.gov. And I think that a lot of people across the political spectrum who look at this program will say, you know what, it makes sense. But can we implement it? Can we get the wealthiest people and the largest corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes? Can we rebuild the infrastructure? Can we reverse climate change? And the answer is, we're not going to be able to do those things if we have elections in which 64% of the people don't vote. And we're not going to be able to do that if people are demoralized or if they're giving up on the political process. So almost the most important thing, even before we talk about 12 points or 50 points, the most important point is for the American people to regain the confidence that in this country we can do great things, that we can once again be a great and powerful country with a great deal of opportunity, protecting the most vulnerable, moving toward a more egalitarian society where some people don't have it all and other people have nothing. But we have to believe that we can do that. And if we believe that we can do that, you know what? The other stuff is pretty easy. And that's the challenge that we face, whether or not people are so demoralized, have given up on the political process, or whether we can galvanize them.
Well, since I think we can galvanize them, but since we're concerned about people being demoralized, Senator Bernie Sanders, my final question for you: earlier this year, a record surfaced in which you sang a number of popular folk and protest songs. I have a guitar with me right now.
No.
I'm not. I'm serious. I can play it. It's about 3 feet away. This land is your land.
I am proud of a lot of what I have accomplished in my political life and look forward to doing more. I am not particularly proud of my singing voice. That was done many, many years ago when I was mayor and had a great group of Vermont musicians with me. They did the work, so I'll let them take credit for it. But no, sorry, Richard.
All right, well, I tuned it up and everything, but all right. All right, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We've been talking with Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Richard. Take care.
I'm Richard. RJ Eskow will be right back after this. This is The Zero Hour.